Welcome to the Elizabeth Farm Podcast, and thank you for listening. If you enjoy our podcast, please like, rate, and subscribe.
Welcome back to the Elizabeth Farm Podcast for episode 3. Today, we've got Mr. James Halvorson with us. We're going to be having some good conversation, but I'll let Mr. Halvorson introduce himself. And if you just want to give us a little bit of information about who you are, how you got started doing what you're doing, and about your family, whatever else you think we need to know.
Well, Zach, thanks again. Thanks for having us. I'm glad to be here and help the community. And as he alluded to, my name is James. My wife and I own Halvorson's Hidden Harvest. It's a local farm here, but a few miles from this facility. And it's something that we started off just trying to learn how to homestead in this area, and it's turned into a full-time business for myself, and soon my wife will be employed on the farm as well. We grow a lot of produce, and we raise a lot of livestock on the farm, and I've moved my parents to the farm. I've moved my wife's parents to the farm, and we grow and produce over 90% of what all three of our families consume on farm. We raise our own beef, we raise our own chickens, we raise goats for dairy. My wife milks the goats, and we make cheese out of it. We grow all of our produce on farm seasonally, year-round. And we've really focused the last few years on creating an educational environment on the farm. We opened a store on the farm. We quit doing a lot of farmers markets. And we encourage anybody and everybody to come out and just learn and ask questions. And, everything we do is an open book. We don't try to sugarcoat anything. We don't try to hide anything. We tell people all the time, it's how we do. It's not how to do. And so we've just struggled for years, not being born and raised in this area, not having those resources to fall back on, being military and moving across the country and kind of having to learn how to do it all here. We spent 2 years learning how to not do it. And so we strive to really help people grow their own food and provide for themselves. So it's just, we just want people to be able to sustain their own quality of life.
Yeah, so you mentioned a little bit about your military background. So what got you into agriculture, farming initially? Was it a passion that you always had? Have you done stuff when you were younger? How did you kind of get started in what y'all are doing now?
So when I was in the military, I was a mechanized engineer, and my wife she was Air Force. And then when we both got out, and she pursued her degree in education, and she's a school teacher here in town. And I worked as a contractor on post for 12 years until I just couldn't put up with the nonsense anymore. We had started wanting to homestead when we bought the property. We had bought a piece of land in 2006. With no intentions of ever farming or doing anything with it. We just knew we didn't want to live in town. Our kids had fallen into that trap that society wants of the whole chicken nuggets, French fries, hot dogs, mac and cheese, processed foods that leads to multiple known health problems as you age. And the information became available, with meeting with local nutritionists. Information was made available to me that you just realize how much is actually in the foods that's in the supermarkets that we're buying and that we're eating and consuming, and you think it's good for you. So I went on this 2-year-long research project of my own about how the food that we're eating is being handled and how it's being grown and how it's being harvested, how it's being shipped and packaged and stored. And you realize that everybody adds something to it by the time it gets to the end consumer. And so no matter the intentions of the farmer, by the time it gets to the consumer, it's not the same product. So in this research, I had come across an article. Everybody's heard of Joel Salatin in this industry. And I started reading some of his literature, 20 years ago, some of his first publications. And he had written about getting kids out in the garden, getting kids outdoors. And, if you have them help you grow it, harvest it, and cook it, then they'll eat it. And so that's why I told my wife, I said, let's start a garden. And nothing we did worked, But, to answer your question, that's probably the one single-handed thing that kind of triggered us into what has turned into our farm, was realizing that if we wanted to get our kids away from the presumed foods that were supposed to be good for you and to knowing what foods were good for yourself and for your children, we realized that we need to start producing it. So we planted our first garden in the spring of 2007. And I think we picked our first vegetable in like fall of 2010. So it was, so it drives you when things don't work, and then you research it, and then there's so much information available, and you got to figure out what applies to where you're at, and your climate, your soil type, your region. I mean, there's so much, and so we went down this rabbit hole, and pretty much in 2008 is when I put all this effort into research and understanding, and between meeting with nutritionists at the VA and meeting with, organic growers versus local growers, and sending products in for independent testing. A lot of people don't realize you can do that. You can research testing labs, and you can, if you're buying organic, grass-fed, unvaccinated beef from a local farmer or rancher, wherever you're at, send it in and make sure it is what he's saying it is, because I did that, and not many people are being honest with what they're selling. And so that's why my wife and I have said, you know what? Let's take our homestead and let's make it a farm. Let's have transparency. Nothing, you've been to our farm several times. I mean, nothing we do is a secret. You can see everything we do. What's out in our fields is on our shelves. If it's not on our shelves, it's because it's not in our fields. We don't base the success of our farm based on profit margin. We base the success of our farm on the community's response to what we're doing. And so it all plays into how you asked how we chose agriculture, but I think farming just ended up choosing me, because it became a passion of mine to realize how good quality of life can be when you have control over every bite of food you eat. There's not a meal a week that I don't have something to do with every bite of food. I mean, it's just, and I take a lot of pride in that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great, because I think, just hearing that and thinking about my own story of seeing where our food comes from and the conventional way of doing things and the things that we're just not told. It's not mainstream. People, a lot of time, they don't know, like you said, they don't know what's on their plate. They don't know where it's come from. And even if they think they have an idea, you could ask somebody where their food comes from and they could say HEB, but the food didn't come from HEB. It started somewhere else, and then it came through whatever channels it had to come through to get there. So yeah, I think it's essential that we as a community know where our food comes from, how it's grown. And I think that is something that's amazing that you guys have done. Like you said, transparency is huge, and y'all are committed to that. And I've seen that with my own eyes, but it's really cool that y'all are doing that. Question I guess I would ask is, you talked about health, you talked about these systems, the conventional systems, and then the alternative way to doing things, how y'all do things. What do you think the community benefits from the way that you guys do things? So whether it's growing food, your outlook on life. You mentioned homesteading. How do you think the community as a whole can benefit from that way of life and then also benefit from what y'all specifically are doing?
So the greatest benefit that my wife and I have seen is the fact that when you get that direct farm to consumer relationship, the community really can learn and they can latch on to the ideas, to the hope that everything doesn't have to be what we've been told is normal. Supermarkets really came about in the 40s and the 50s, and that's what really changed small farm America. It was the invention of supermarkets and having to create a massive amount of food for cheap to feed everybody. Well, when you mass produce things, you lose versatility and you lose the dynamics that are in nature. And so you have allergy problems now that didn't exist. Think back to your guys' grandparents. Did they wake up every day and complain about their allergies being problems? Mine didn't. But mine were outside working the farm fields, working the garden, hanging clothes out on the laundry, on the clothesline. And so when you immerse yourself in it and you're out in it, your body builds up immunities to all these things that become problems. And so with the sense of community, by opening a store on the farm, the people can come out there and the people can see it and they're out in it. They can walk through and pick the squash. They can see the squash. They can see the radishes. They can see the weeds. They can see the bugs. They can see, and they start to understand that you don't have to have a perfect looking garden. Everybody's used to seeing these pictures in magazines of what a perfect garden looks like. And then they come look at mine and they realize, hey, we can do that. Like, yo, you don't have to pull that weed. If I don't pull it today, guess what? It'll be there tomorrow. And so people get reassurance because they when they do a home garden, they think it has to be perfect because their neighbors is perfect or the guy across the streets is perfect or, so-and-so's, family member has a perfect garden. And so when they come out and they see our farm and they realize that my rows aren't straight because I can't drive my tractor straight and, I don't, Mother Nature kind of does her own thing with certain crops when you seed them, as you're dropping seed, the wind blows. And so now this road just took a right-hand turn and, so people really benefit by coming out to the farm and seeing how things can be done, even at a scale that I'm at, but still be done conventionally. Like there's nothing that I do that anybody can't do. I mean, my first 5 years of farming was done with a shovel and a hoe and a pitchfork. Like that was, and a garden hose. I mean, everything was by hand. We turned it all by hand and it was just hard work. But the community has responded because they really enjoy coming out there. They can see the goats, they can see the chickens. Oh, the cows are right there. All our produce is, all of our fields are surrounding the stores. You can walk through the peach trees. You can walk and pick grapes. And so we don't there's no admission fee. So people you don't have to pay just to come enjoy an hour or two with your family to come feed the goats. You're doing me a favor. And so it's created a place that the community has responded to the point that it's everything my wife and I can do to keep up.
So what you're saying is small scale farming can actually still work and still make people healthy.
Yes, small scale farming, it's working for me.
Yeah.
It's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah.
It's about the perspective. What is success to you? Every individual's definition of success is different. I don't need to have a 6-figure bank account to feel like I succeeded. If my kids and my family that I'm surrounded by every day are eating a meal of food that I produced, that's success to me. So in small scale farming, you have to curtail your expectations. You can't, because you see somebody that's producing 5,000 pounds of one thing in this week, You can't say, well, I'm not going to be successful if I don't produce 5,000 pounds, because that guy's probably running a $250,000 rig, doing all his soil work, and, he's probably got help. And, we've built our business with $0 from the start. We had seed and we planted it and it failed. And I begged and borrowed with neighbors and different members of the community for more seed, and I planted that and it didn't grow again. And then I got with my neighbors and some family members that had been living here, got plants from them and got seeds from them and helped them in their gardens for a summer. And then I started to see the errors in what I was doing. And so by helping some elderly folks that were in our area, I was able to learn, because they had, the one husband and wife, they had lived in this area their entire lives, and they were in their upper 80s at the time.
Mm.
So the knowledge that they have is priceless. And I would go over there and help them in their garden. And a glass of lemonade and conversation in the evenings with them, to me, was worth its weight in gold, because I learned so much. I learned about the different varieties. It's one thing to plant tomatoes, but open up a catalog. There's 2,000-3,000 varieties of tomatoes in every catalog. So they narrowed it down to, the handful that grow in our region. And so it's just, you kind of develop a system based on your resources that are available. We didn't have nothing, so we built our farm with nothing. And so that's really has continued to this day. We just reinvest earnings from the store. We put it back into the farm, and we're growing the business. I don't know if that'll ever stop. We were going to be, 10 years ago, we were happy making X amount of dollars. Well, now, if that's all I made now, I wouldn't even cover 1/4 of my cost. I would burn that up in 3 months' time. So, you just kind of, we grew very organically within the agriculture. We started with produce, and then added eggs, and then we added goats, and we added fruit trees, and now we're adding beef, and we added honeybees, and it just seems like it keeps growing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, and I think one of the things that I keep hearing come up, along with community, it is just that aspect of what you can learn from this type of life and how you learn so much. Because I know for me, we've talked about this, but I'm newer, and you've already taught me a ton on the farming aspect. Casey, I've learned from so many different people from the farming aspect, but it seems like this idea of community always comes back to how things run best, right? You guys are centered on bringing in a community to come and look at what you're doing, to see the beauty of what you've created, in God's creation. And that's what we're trying to do as well at Elizabeth Farm, is to allow people to come into what God has given us, God has blessed us with, to show beauty, to create beauty. And through that, you get the economic systems that you see work, right? Even if it's as simple as, you don't think of this as an economic system, but even going to your neighbor and getting advice and, giving them, or them giving you a jar of lemonade, or whatever the case is, just those small acts of love and kindness are an economic system, and they grow and they expand, and you're able to help others. And I think that's one of the coolest things, is that in farming, you're surrounded by growth, but oftentimes you don't think about the human to human growth that happens. You see the plants, you see the animals, you see things that, that are growing and expanding. But really, one of the coolest things to see is when people do, and I'm sure you can attest to this, but when people get involved and people really do start to have their lives changed by something as simple as a head of lettuce or a head of cabbage that's been grown in this unique way. It shouldn't be unique, but a unique way in today's day and age, and how that can affect their happiness, how that can affect how they view the rest of life. So I think it's just really cool. We do focus on the farming aspect because that's what we do, but it's so much more than that in the sense that it can change lives. It can, our mission at Feed My Sheep and at Elizabeth Farm is to feed those that are hungry physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I'll say this time and time again, I know I'm biased, I know you're probably biased, but I don't think there's any better way to do that than with the use of agriculture, with the use of what God has given us to grow and sustain us. So all that to be said, I think that's really profound just to think about simple things being the most important things. But yeah, so how about tell us, you've told us where y'all have come from and where y'all are at now, what y'all are doing, the amazing things that y'all are doing for our community. What's the plan? Are y'all looking at growing? Are y'all looking at bringing people on? I know you mentioned some work at the farm going on, but what is y'all's plans going forward?
Yeah, we're trying to grow within reason for what the community has responded to. With your last statement you were making, the biggest thing for us is when we started our farm, we tried to grow everything, but the community didn't require that. Like, I was growing a lot of things that people don't want. I wanted them, so I thought everybody wanted them. A lot of the bok choy cabbages and daikon radishes, and there's so many crops. But once we started selling and we started opening up to the community on farm 4 years ago, when people come out there, we're rural Bell County. So the community in rural Bell County is different than what you have in Williamson and Travis County. I could take crops that I was growing down to farmers markets down there and have a line waiting for them, but I wasn't serving my community. So that's where me and my wife, we made the commitment to focus on being hyper local and we've got like a 25-mile radius, hard perimeter from our farm that we try to support. Like, we don't try to go any further than that, because we have found that the community that's right here in Central Texas, right here in the Temple area, they're really wanting, a lot of old time crops, a lot of the, like the patty pan squashes and some old timey melons that you can't necessarily find in supermarkets. And so we've adjusted what we've grown to fit what our actual community here is looking for. So that's just kind of going back on your last point that you were making. But the question that you had asked here was about our future. I don't know. The answer I give you today is going to be different than tomorrow. We're trying to make the farm the full-time employment for my wife and myself. It's been my full-time employment for the last 8 years, but we're planning on, I'm building a big new barn right now. That's going to be for housing more goats, because we're gonna increase our dairy production. I didn't realize there was that much demand for the raw goat's milk and for the cheeses and stuff that we can make. We're trying to increase our ability to produce more dairy products on the farm. We're really expanding into the beekeeping. I've been beekeeping for about 15 years with a few hives on the farm. We started really expanding about 3 years ago. And this year we've made the commitment financially and physically, where we're planning on pretty much tripling our honey production so that people can have a trusted source of local honey. There's numbers circulating that like 80% of the honey that's being sold in the U.S. is falsely advertised. 80%. That's a crazy number. And the more research I do into that, the more I realize it's probably a low estimation of 80%. There's a lot of honey coming in from overseas. There's a lot of honey coming in from China. There's a lot of honey coming from Canada. And so the USDA standard is 51%. So if you're buying a local honey, as long as it's 50, as long as that producer put 51% of that bottle is local honey, the other 49% can be whatever they want it to be. And those are the rabbit holes in research that I end up going down, because I really go in deep with it. And I got about 400 hours of research into this honey over the last let's say 8 months, as to how true, how reliable are the sources that are pushing out these numbers. And it's kind of scary. I've talked to other beekeepers. I've talked to big operations, commercial operations, small people, and I've bought local honey that's not local. I've bought local honey at farmers markets and sent it in and found out it's canola, and it's stuff that's not grown in Central Texas. So beekeeping is going to be one of our big. We can't, we run 45 hives now. I mean, you've had our honey. We can't keep it on the shelf. We don't adulterate our honey. I mean, we did a honey extraction this fall for a class. We just let people come out, to see it right from the honeycomb right to the bottles they took home. I mean, if you're there when it's being extracted from the hive, then you're getting the real product. And customers appreciate that transparency. So they don't mind that there's some beeswax involved and there's some work involved, because they feel like they're not being lied to, and their taste, and the proof is in the taste. Like, you can really taste when products have been adulterated. So, but that's our big plans, and beef production. In our store for about 2 years, I've been trying to find a rancher that provides unvaccinated beef. I'm not real big on grass-fed beef. I don't care for grass-fed beef, the flavor. I like grain-fed beef, and that's going to stir up a lot of people. There's a lot of people in this world that are
Me, I'm included in that.
And it's, so we're not like a breed specific. People want Angus, or people want, certain types of beef. I want unvaccinated beef. I want beef that I know is good for my family and for my consumers. And so I had talked to a handful of local ranchers. I had bought some beef from these local ranchers, and it, the test would come back, 9 parts per million, synthetics. And I'm not going to get into the rabbit hole of all the different synthetics that are used in vaccinations. And I mean, there's some really gnarly stuff out there that I don't want to eat, and I don't want my family to eat. So I'm not going to sell it to my customers to eat. So my wife and I decided 2 years ago that we're going to transition from a cow-calf operation and just selling calves, and using the cows basically for a tax exemption on the property that we weren't growing produce on. And I just said, you know what? So we're going to raise our own beef, and we're going to start selling our own beef direct from the farm. So we've got, it was a decision that was made 2 years ago. And so at the end of March this year, we will have steaks and hamburger and all that stuff for sale in our store. So those are some pretty big additions. It's been a whirlwind winter trying to, because running a cow-calf operation is completely different than actually being able to wean calves and raise calves and rotationally graze them and keep them away from mom, and then having areas that I can feed out the animals so that I can have them processed. Because there's, we've adapted a hybrid system. We don't grass feed. Every cow you hear the marketing terms: grass fed, grass finished. Every cow is grass-fed. I don't understand why that's in marketing terms. Like, every cow is on pasture until the day it starts getting fed out. Okay, so from the time they wean it off mom at 4 to 7 months old till 22 or 23 months old, it's on pasture, it's on grass. It's every cow. I don't brag that we have grass-fed beef, because all beef is grass-fed. I brag, that we have unvaccinated beef. That is our marketing slogan. Is any calf that was born on our property, we've never vaccinated it. It's never had anything. It's never had a fly spray put on it. It's never had any type of synthetic used whatsoever in its lifetime. And then we use a hybrid finishing system. So, the argument of grass finished or grain finished. If you source your grain responsibly, you can grain finish beef as good, and to me is better, than grass-fed. People don't like grain-fed because they think that every ounce of corn or every kernel of corn and every bit of grain has been fed with the corn or the soy or the barley or the rice or the wheat. All the grain has been adulterated, and it's GMO, and it's been used with all these synthetic fertilizers and herbicides and insecticides, and that's up to the producer. I go through an exorbitant amount of money and an exorbitant amount of time researching to buy grain that is non-GMO and stuff like that we feed our cattle out on. Everything we do is open. Like, you can come out to the farm, you can see what we feed. I take out 22 pounds of grain every morning to all the cows that we are sending off for processing, because I just like the flavor.
Yeah.
We raised cows so we've been raising our own beef for processing on our farm for 5 years. Now we're going to start having some for sale. So for 4 years, I finished beef 4 different ways. I did all corn finish. Straight up cheap corn from a feed store, that was good beef. The second year we did a grass finished beef, so we just left them on pasture the whole time. And we rotated them through green pastures, and we rotated them through dry grass, and we had them on pasture, and we kept hay down free choice. I had over 200 pounds of that beef that I ended up feeding to the wildlife on my farm. It sat in my freezer so long because I didn't care to eat it. It was a 23-month-old steer that we had processed, and that I did not care for it. It was tough. It didn't have the marbling that a grain-fed beef has. And so last year, the steer that I raised for us on the family and the farm to eat, I did a hybrid system. So I penned them up. I kept them in an area that's still much larger than what USDA requires, but I kept hay down for them, free choice, and I give each head of cattle 22 pounds of grain every single day. That's put out every morning for them, free choice. So we have a hybrid finishing system where they're getting grain and grass, and that steer that we had processed last year was the most amazing beef that I'd ever eaten in my life. So you can sit there and you can preach about grass-fed.
I won't say anything.
But at the end of this month, when you come out,
I'll be
buy
eating
one
one
of this hamburger.
I didn't say I'm not going to kill it.
You're going to look at me and you're going to say you're right.
Okay.
So,
well, I guess we'll see. No, that is cool though, and it's cool to hear the process. I think once again, just the transparency, because my mind keeps going back to our mission. Feeding hungry, spiritually and emotionally hungry people. And I think that is very important, the aspect of having transparency, because, a lot of times you can look at an individual and you just see different aspects of a person. You see the health aspect. You may see the individual aspects, but you don't see a person as a whole person. And, I know we are talking a lot about farming, which is what we love, but it does impact the whole person, from how things are grown, from the transparency. Like you said, I mean, you can't love and care about people if you're going to continuously lie to them. So transparency, bringing people in and showing them the goodness that comes from the way of life, yes, but also from the food, from the health that you get from these systems. So
yes, it's with me personally, being ex-military and being around the people and the lifestyles that I was around when I was young really made me a person that I didn't want to be. I was raised, things that shouldn't have been normal were normal for me. And so, I joined the military right out of high school because I needed to remove myself from that situation. When we bought this land and we started homesteading it, I still tried to apply who I was at the time to homesteading, but that wasn't a very good person. We tried to look for the easy way to do things. You tried to find shortcuts and cheats, and there is no cheat code farming. Like, it doesn't exist. And it took me 2 years, 2.5 years to figure that out. And so taking on this full-time farmer role and being immersed in it every day has made me much more appreciative of those lessons that I learned 2 years ago. So that farming really changed my perspective of life in general. I used to walk around angry at the world. I mean, I was upset all the time. It didn't matter. Even if I was having a good day, I mean, I could just freak out if one person approached me and said one thing that was wrong. And it would, and there was an old timer that I was working with still as a contractor. And this was, we were about 3 or 4 years into farming, where my wife was working full time and I was still holding down a full-time job. Plus we were both farming full time and doing farmers markets on weekends. And so I was working with this old timer. His name was Jerry. He was a contractor with me. And he was listening to me bellyache one day about all the things that were wrong in this world. And he just said, why not just be positive? He's like, you come in and you're just angry and upset. He's like, it's just making the people around you angry and upset. He's like, why not just be positive? He's like, so what if it broke? You needed a new one. He's like, who cares if the water wasn't hot enough in your shower? He's like, by your cold shower, you got out faster and you saved water. He's like, and so you can apply that when you're farming. You can kind of realize that everything doesn't have to be perfect. Like I was talking about earlier, people think that their gardens have to look a certain way, and man, the garden just needs to look right to you. It don't need to look right to everybody else. And those are the lessons that I learned with farming is, who cares if there's a weed there? You know what? I'll make it to it. I may not. And so you realize, and it does change you, and it changes your perspective, and you realize that everything doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to be a success. You can just manage it, so that's helped me a lot, being able to, I didn't plan May 22nd this last year, the tornadoes that ripped through Temple. I mean, it destroyed my entire crop. Like, we lost everything on the farm. I went out there on the 23rd and just started replanting. I could have been upset and let it carry me and drag me down for weeks on end, but I just said, hey, I guess we weren't supposed to grow that this year. Let's go ahead and we can do this now. And so we had a good season last year. It just was a different season. So it really teaches you how to be patient and how to relax and think things through. That's the biggest thing. Farmers base their lives on efficiency. That's the number one thing that I realized once I became a full-time farmer was how inefficient I was at everything in life. I was out of if I was out of a beverage to drink, get in the car and go get it. If I needed new socks, get in the car, go get it. And so I'd make 30 trips to town each week. Well, once you start farming and you realize how inefficient daily tasks can be, you learn how to, you learn how to set up your life to work more efficient, because efficiency equals production. Uh, you know, so it's something that's translated across our lives on the farm, as far as, with my wife and her profession and raising kids, and we've just learned how to be more efficient. So you just it's really been a blessing. I've learned things that I didn't realize I needed to learn.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing. I think, just talking about the learning aspect, and then the trust you have to have. One of the things just with the tornado, there's things that sometimes we don't expect in life, and things happen, and you have to be able to respond. But I do think that's something that, from my short time in farming, I've learned, is the trust aspect. And this is somewhere where I've, spiritually learned so much, because I think you can look at farming. I mean, obviously it's God's creation, but you see so many redemptive aspects with viewing the world in a redemptive way, and the beauty of watching things grow, and, talking about being resourceful and using things that seem broken. I think all of these things can point to what Christ has done for us, because he takes broken vessels, he takes broken things, and he repairs them, he renews them. And it is so cool to see on a farm, on land, that beautiful aspect of everything has a system, everything has a purpose. You just have to figure out, like we talked about at the farm, it's like you have to figure out what system goes where. How can it be most efficient? What can you use on this garden plot or with these animals? How can you help people and animals and plants do their job the way God created them to do it? And I think I know for me, that's what I've learned most, because I'm terrible at patience. I want to be in control of everything. Tyler, my wife, and I, we were talking about this.
Quit farming.
Well, I know that, but I think that's why I like it, because it fixes me. But I mean, my wife and I, we were talking about
Everyone's in control.
Yeah, I know. But I do think that's one of the beautiful things about it. And one way it's going to help me the most is because I was telling her this the other day. I was like, I'm really bad when I'm not in control of things. I don't have a good attitude. I like to be in control, but you can't. And like you said, I mean, it's the way that life is. Sometimes you are just not in control. Most of the time, you're not in control. And farming teaches you that, and it teaches you to trust and rely, first and foremost, on the Lord, but on others, on the community. And I think that is why it's so beautiful, is that it can change your whole outlook on life. It can change how you not just view the systems of farming, but walking down the street, how you view another person, how you view the needs of people. Because, I think in our society, we think we need so many things. We think we need so many comforts, but we have very few actual needs, right? We have a lot of wants, we have a lot of desires, but as far as the human body and the human mind is concerned, I mean, we don't have a ton of needs. We have a lot of wants and desires, but that is the beauty that I think you get from the vision, from the view of farming, is you see what people need. You start to become more resourceful. You start to see things differently. So yeah, I think it's, that was very well said. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful life. And I'm glad that we get to be a part of it. You've been part of it for a good while, but I'm excited to keep going and to continue this with our community. So
And like I said, this journey started in 2008. We're more enthralled now than even when we started.
yeah.
It's just one of them. The more you do it, the more information you gather, the more confidence you get, and really the sky's the limit. There's just no, like I told you when he was out at the farm last week, my saying is the only wrong way to do it is to not do it at all. Even if it doesn't work in your first year, you learn valuable lessons. So, being out there on the farm, in nature, even if it's in your backyard, just being outside where you can hear the songbirds and you can hear, the different aspects of nature. You can hear the wind blowing through the trees, and I mean that's such a relaxing, calming feeling for me to just hear the breeze flowing through the trees, and it just puts me at peace. So I just really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an escape for sure. And I think that's one of the things that, we're focusing on too, is just changing the perspective, because you can get stuck, like especially in a city, you just get stuck in this way of life, this routine, and you think there's nothing else. And getting out, like you said, even if it's in your backyard, going out to Halvorson's Hidden Harvest, going out to Elizabeth Farm, like seeing these places that give you a different perspective and help you to see that life doesn't have to be restricted to what the government tells us it needs to be restricted to, or what the big food companies tell us it needs to be restricted to, or whoever's guiding and telling you what your life has to be. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be different. So, but okay. So I think that's about all the questions I got for you, but why don't you tell people how they can find you guys, how they can get connected, how we can continue to grow together as a community?
Well, you can find us. The name of our farm is Halvorson's Hidden Harvest. You can find that. We're on Facebook at Halvorson's Hidden Harvest. We're on Instagram at HH Harvest. We have a website. We're fixing to launch the online ordering and home delivery side of it. Hopefully that'll be up and running this summer. You can come to the farm. We're at 3200 Chief DeLand here in Temple. We're just outside of town. The store's open every week, every Wednesday and Saturday from 9 to 2. We've partnered with several other local farms. So we've got pork that's being raised in Holland. We've got chicken that's being raised in Rogers. We've got fresh sourdough bread from Troy. We've got a guy here in town that's making homemade fudge, and we're looking at adding some other local farms and ranches to our lineup. So you can always reach out to us on any of our socials and find us. You can always send us emails, whole 9 yards.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being on.
Thanks for having us. And
yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys can develop the Elizabeth Farm into. I really, going out there and getting to walk the grounds in that facility out there with you, and to see your passion for it, and to see the capabilities and the possibilities that are out there with that land. It's a good location, and there's the sky's the limit. If you guys can stay after it and get the help and the resources, there's no way around it. It's a lot of work.
yes,
There's no way to sugarcoat that. But you're going to wake up one day when you're out there and you're going to be like, look what we've created. Look what we've done. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
My wife and I joke all the time that we're 15 years into a 5-year plan, but we got to where we wanted. The 5-year plan, we got there. It's taken us longer. So, but life delivered some hardships along the way that we had to deal with. So,
seems to do that.
That's life.
Yep.
Wouldn't be.
Yep.
It makes everybody who they are.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And that redemption aspect for sure. All right. Well, yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think that's, one of the biggest things we've talked about is continuing to grow together. And that's how we're going to make Elizabeth Farms work. That's how Halvorson's has worked, and they've done a tremendous job. So go check them out and continue to stay updated with us. We're going to be putting out some stuff coming up. Of course, you know how to find us, Facebook, all that good stuff. Keep listening to the podcast. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Halvorson. Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate you as always. Y'all have a good week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Elizabeth Farm Podcast. For more content, follow us on your favorite social media platforms. Elizabeth Farm Podcast is a production of Red Cord Media, recorded in Temple, Texas. For more information on this and other podcasts, please visit redcordmedia.org.